with Bobby Hood. Bobby, how are you doing today?
Just great. Just enjoying this series, talking about all the different things to think about and ask questions about when you're considering a college.
Yeah, and today what we're doing is talking about the subject of selectivity. So I think to kind of get everybody up to speed, it would be important for them to understand what happens in the back end with the universities and colleges and what they're thinking on selectivity, because I think it'll kind of set the stage for them on, why certain things happen the way they do. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I mean, so this is a complicated topic, and so I'm just going to point you point people who are listening in the direction of things to go look up and understand this better, right? So selectivity, everybody talks about, highly selective colleges, and there's this percent chance you'll get in or whatever, and it's a lot more complicated than that, right? So colleges, all selectivity means is colleges that accept fewer than 100% of who applies. And most colleges in the United States, like more than half of the colleges accept everybody who applies. It's just at the top end of the scale, you get some colleges that don't. It all averages out to that average acceptance rate is 66%. If you put all the colleges together, some it's as low as 10%, some it's 100%. But basically, colleges will get rated and ranked by U.S. News based on their selectivity numbers, which says, okay, what percent do they accept out of the number that apply? And so you can go and look at any of the data sites that we've talked about before. The Princeton Review has good data about colleges. The U.S. government Department of Education has a website about numbers you can look up. And so you can look at the average admitted student, right? And they'll give you a range, like, for instance, ACT 28 to 31. What that means is if you divide the acceptances into the admitted accepted students into four quartiles, 25% were below a 28, 50%, the middle two quartiles, were between 28 and 31, and then 25% were above a 31. And they'll do the same thing with GPA ranges and whatever. And so if you see that your score or GPA range is inside those numbers, then that means you'd be in the middle 50% of the students admitted. If you're above that percentage, then there's a higher chance that you'll, get admitted, because you would be more qualified than the average student on that particular score. And so that's one way to use like selectivity to help you figure out what your chances are of getting admitted to a school are. But it's important to remember the other piece of this, which is, so colleges get all these applications and they take your GPA and your SAT and other things, and they calculate a index score for you as a student. And if your score, according to their calculations, is very high, then there's probably a really good chance that you'll be admitted. And so early on in the process, they just have this pile of applications, and they take maybe the top 10% index scores. If there's nothing wrong with those applications, they admit those students. Those students get admitted really quick. And then they just keep coming back to that pile. And so if you are not in that average or top, quartile or whatever, it's going to take longer for them to make the decision to admit you. They're going to have to keep looking at other things, right? They're going to have to see other things in your application. The one last thing I wanted to mention on that point is that it's not just selectivity as in the percent of students you admit that matters to colleges. U.S. News also ranks, and other ranking services rank colleges based on their yield, which is, the yield is out of the students you accept, how many of them actually decide to attend. So if you have a freshman class that's going to have 10,000 people in it or whatever, if you're a gigantic college, or if it's going to have 1,000 people in it, do you have to admit 1,500 to get your class of 1,000? Or do you have to admit 1,100, right? So that would be, more like 90% versus 50% or whatever, yield on the students they admit. And so when they are choosing between students, if they see a demonstrated interest in attending, they know you're going to come if you accept them. You've got a lot of legacy, like your people in your family, or you're from that area, or you expressed in your like essay that you really want to live in this town or something like that,
Well, we've talked even
they're more likely to pick you. Go
yeah,
ahead.
we've talked too about the amount of touch points, right? Where that
Mm-hmm.
you did visit, that you did make phone calls, that you did do an interview with your college of choice within the college or the department within the college, and all of those pieces. Again, it kind of goes towards your tally, right?
Absolutely. And so yeah, so that's the main thing, is that it's not just they look at your numbers and they say yes or no. It is so many more things, right? But certainly the starting point is say, okay, where do I fall in their selectivity numbers for this college? That's the beginning of the conversation,
It is. And
right?
Bobby, one of the things that you brought up, and I want to make sure it was really clear to people that are listening, is that yield number is important to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you are trying to get in and they're not seeing those tick marks that you did make the
Mm-hmm.
extra effort, you'll probably have less of a chance. So it goes back to, if you've got a kiddo that's sending out 20 applications
Mm-hmm.
and he's got his top 5 that he's really spending time on, and those lower ones, he might not get accepted to those,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Oh,
If you're not
absolutely. Yeah.
seeing,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, for instance, like when I'm working with students who are writing their essays, like students don't think about this, but you write your generic essay and put it into the Common App, and then you just click submit on all these colleges. Well, I said, no, you have to change that essay for each school, and you have to say at the end of the essay, you need to say why you're excited to go to this school, and you have to mention the school, and you can't just submit the same essay to every school. And it's kind of hard to do that, like to make that change, because the way Common App is like, here's your essay, just click here to submit it. You have to go change it, and be careful to make sure you don't submit the wrong one to the wrong college,
Right, which I
right?
would totally do. That was would be me.
Oh
Well,
my gosh,
and
right.
yeah, but I want to go talk about the flip side of this too, and I want to
Mm-hmm.
stay on this yield part, right?
Mm-hmm.
That my concern as a mom, and as trying to lift kids up and have them feel confident about this process, that if they start getting turned down by some of this, the 19th, 20th, even
Mm-hmm.
10th or 8th on their list,
Yeah.
that that concerns me as well. So because you don't want them to feel like, oh my gosh, I can't even get into my stretch schools or my right.
Right.
So again, I think you just have to understand how the process works, and then you can make your good solid decisions based on that.
Absolutely. I mean, because that's the thing when it comes down to it, is it's not, the goal is, and I say this to people in tutoring all the time, the goal is not to get a score on the ACT or your SAT that's going to get you into a college that your GPA wouldn't have gotten you into, right? You don't necessarily want that, right? You want your SAT or ACT score to be consistent with or above your GPA, so that you will be accepted by the college you love and possibly get, some merit aid or something like that, right? That's the thing, because it's more about, what's important is, are you going to love this school and are you going to fit in? And part of that is, you can tell, like, if you think about what it would mean to go to a school where your GPA and your test scores would be in the bottom quartile, that might not be a very fun place for you to be, right?
For sure, you're going to struggle. Yeah,
Absolutely. You're going
yeah.
to be in these classes that are curved, the grades are curved, and, you're, again, competing against students who had higher GPA than you in high school. Like, things would have to dramatically change for you to be able to get good grades there, and that's a big part of it, right? You don't want to be struggling the entire way through your college experience, right? And so that's one of the easy ways to find out, is go look and say, okay, do I fit? Am I right in the middle here? Am I a little toward the top end? Like, of course, that's, if you see that you are near the top end of those ranges, so you'd be near the top quartile, you're much more likely to be getting merit aid and things like that from the school. So if that's something you're looking for and you don't want to pay full price, right, start out with that and try to find some colleges that you would love, right, but where you're at or above their top numbers, right?
Yeah, and Bobby, as you were talking, even though this isn't really part of this subject, it just,
Mhm.
I think it's so important.
Mhm.
And that is, depending on where you're wanting to go to school,
Mhm.
You can go and look to see what those average scores are. And
Mhm.
if those schools are willing to give you assured scholarships,
Right.
you can kind of figure out if you've got the GPA and the test scores that match, you can pretty much rest assured you're going to get into that school.
Mhm. That's a really, really good point because this idea of assured scholarships, I mean, they've always existed, but I think it's just easier. I think more colleges are doing it and it's easier to find out about them. And they're like, yeah, absolutely. If you are like, can see that University of Arkansas or somebody like that, some big state school says you're going to get this, tuition deal, you're going to get this merit aid at these numbers, yeah, of course you're going to get in unless there's something very strange, in your application.
Yeah.
Right.
So the other thing that I love about this is when you're thinking about your test scores, your SAT and ACT, it gives you something to shoot for if you're like, oh,
Mhm.
I need X to get into this school or I need X to get this much more money. So now, they can come to you and they've got at least, hey, Bobby, I'm trying to hit this number.
Right.
Now that's 12 more points or 1,000 more points, or whatever.
Mhm.
Like then you can help them and go, oh, well, okay, let's talk about this, right? I don't
Sure.
know if it's a true opportunity for you,
Mhm.
but
Right.
if it's a couple hundred points or a couple
Mhm.
points on the ACT, then it's like, yeah, okay, let's gun for it, man. Let's make it happen. And but now it's facts, and that's what I love
Mhm.
about that piece of it is
Right.
it kind of brings it down to facts for you, where you can go, is this a school that I can get into? They're people like me. And
Mhm.
now it's less of this emotional roller coaster of, am I going to get in? And, all these things. You're starting fact based, which I think is so much more helpful because in this process, you hear so many families being overwhelmed. And I
Mhm.
think if we can ground them in just, okay, here are some of the knowns, let's
Mhm.
start there. That it just is helpful, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's just so important, like way to look at all of this, which is, like if if you have a high GPA, if you have high test scores, people start immediately leading you in the range of the most highly selective colleges, and that's great to go and check them out. But like, you don't want to just apply to all of them and just hope you're going to get into one of them. You would need to actually really love one of them and investigate it and want to go there and and like do the work and communicate with them and show that you want to go there to even have a chance because of the selectivity thing. And where you now, I think the much simpler path is finding a place with, like if you, where you can look at those facts and say, okay, I can see these things. It's very likely I'll get in, right? If I do these things, if I see these numbers. And that is like so much of my tutoring lately, the past few years, has been parents who call and say, hey, we've got a 26. This college says if we get a 28 on the ACT, then we get this, $60,000 or $80,000 in tuition. I mean, it's such a regular thing. And yeah, and that is such an easy way through this selectivity process to say, okay, well, if I can hit those numbers, then I can be pretty sure of, attending. And I think it's just, once you look at a college and start thinking about it, that's when you get the feeling, okay, I'd love it here, right?
Mhm.
You have to do that researching, right? And then you have to start thinking about it because most high school students aren't just by default haven't figured out a college that they would love to go to, or the one they think they would love to go to they're wrong about because it's just wherever their older brother or uncle or wherever went, right?
Mhm. Yep.
And you need to figure out what's the right for you. And that's part of it, I think. And so that's just remembering to research selectivity, I guess, to wrap this up. Use selectivity as a tool for information of figuring out whether you're going to be happy at a place, how easy it is going to be, what the chances are of getting in. Use all that to, help figure out, can I get an assured scholarship, all that, and try to take some of the stress out of this process, right?
Yep.
Instead of that thing where if you just apply to 20 places and roll the dice, if they can see that you are not personalizing your application anyway to that school, there's a chance that they're just going to say, this student doesn't seem to be sold on this school.
And by
Why
the way,
should we waste
Bobby,
a spot on them?
let's go back to, yeah, hopefully then you don't have to apply to 8 schools. You can apply
Right.
to 3 and
Mhm.
feel like you've got an opportunity at a couple of those, or if not all three, So I think too, it just reduces some of this stress, which is what you and I try to do all the time, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
That's
and it is.
entanglements.
The more student schools you add in, it does not get easier. It's not just clicking a button on the Common App. I mean, it is
It's work.
exponentially more work and more money and more stress and like absolutely. So do that work, before, like if you haven't done it yet, do it right now if you're an incoming senior. But if you just started your junior year, right? This is what to, and I think you've talked about this before, is, have like a checklist where you each 2 weeks during junior year, you do one little thing about colleges, right? And just check it off week by week, get a little
Yes.
bit done,
And
right?
I
And then
have
when the
that.
summer comes,
Yes,
yeah, and
we
this is
have that
something you've
now. So
got, right?
I'll put it in the comments. And what
Absolutely.
it is, it's a college planning timeline, super basic and simple. I've left it as simple as I could get it to make sure you get everything that you need, but it doesn't feel overwhelming, because it shouldn't have to be overwhelming.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Well,
Thanks,
this is great.
Bobby.
All right.